Good day, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in today. On behalf of India Mobile Congress and KPMG, this is Atul Gupta, welcoming you to a very interesting panel discussion where we're going to talk upon security and data privacy ethics, trust, test, and assure, a multi-pronged approach. This is a topic which is very resonating in current times, specifically when there's a rapid digital adoption along with increased connectivity, which is enabling everyone to connect upon digitally and leverage the power of technology. While there's so much happening on the technology and the efficiency and the effectiveness which everyone is able to derive on one side, but equally on the other side, there are concerns which are emerging on ensuring that there is a safe and a secure environment. There's a digitally trusted environment in which everyone can operate upon so that one can make the most out of the opportunity which is available today. Well, I am privileged today to have a very, very empowered panel along with me who will be discussing on this in detail over the next 45 to 50 minutes. And we'll make sure that we bring in various facets to life at this point of time. Just as a quick introduction of the panel members who are going to be here, I just present this slide for a minute, which will demonstrate who all are going to join upon on the panel today. Uh, the first person who's coming on the panel is Vishak Raman. He's coming in from Cisco, and he brings in very specific insights with respect to how networking and the newer emerging technologies are going to play a big role in the having a cyber safe and a secure world with which is full of trust at any given point of time. Along with Vishak, we'll have Nandini who will be joining in. Nandini obviously brings in a perspective more focused upon from a data protection and a privacy and how in the current COVID environment, this has become increasingly an important area. Nandini joins us today in from Canada to make it sure that we have a truly global outreach and able to have people coming in and participating and sharing their perspectives on this panel. Post Nandini, we've got Stiepan Kovac. He's again someone who's been very, very focused on the entire data protection from an encryption perspective. And he brings in very unique perspectives around how the world is going to change as we start looking at quantum computing becoming a reality. And it's bringing upon its own nuances from a quantum safe computing, quantum safe cryptography, and where are those potential use cases which are emerging, which in the current environment where 5G is becoming a reality, blockchains are becoming more and more, getting more and more use cases, and payment channels are just increasing. The right usage of quantum will be one of the key elements which Stephen will be talking. After Stephen, we have got Andrew Fisk. Andrew is joining in again from Canada. And his focus really will be what are the weakest links? Technology is providing such a huge opportunity at this point of time for us to leverage the business, to leverage the value which the business can maximize upon. But at the same point of time, the threat surface is increasing and it is resulting in newer and wider areas which are emerging as the weakest links. And amongst the weakest links, people continue to be the one which is very weak. And Andrew will bring upon his elements to cover upon on the same as we go through the panel. And last but not the least is Anjan, who's joining us from Sterlite Technologies. Anjan is going to bring upon perspective from a nation how the efforts which have been taken upon has helped the country move forward in the direction on cyber and what role the ecosystem is going to play because there is a huge ecosystem which is emerging and has been created upon for startups as well as there's a common concern around the skills and how the ecosystem is again helping to build upon their skills. With all these panel participants today, I know it's going to be challenging for me to manage upon the time, because each one of them bring in their own elements of depth to be covering upon on the topic. As a moderator in the session today, I will ensure I do two roles, and I'll request my panel participants also to keep a check on me, because one of the roles which I'm going to do is keep a time check on everyone. We want to make sure it gets completed in time. The second one is where I will try bringing in some perspectives, more being a KPMG consultant, saying how are we looking at it at this point of time, and then I will request each one of the panelists to do a deep dive. That's the two roles which I'll be playing upon, and then every panel that I run upon, I eventually like takeaways for the audiences so that it's worth the time that they have invested upon. I'll round up the discussion today by bringing in the roundup in terms of what's the conclusion and what's the takeaway for all the audiences today later as we complete on the panel. With that background, let me really get started on this one. And maybe I'll invite Vishak right up ahead. Vishak, as you see, the topic which we're talking upon today is looking across on the trust. And one of the elements which the current pandemics has told us is to relook upon the trusted environment. And there's always a conversation going around zero trust is the right way to operate upon over here. And more, with the increased network connectivities, with IoT becoming a reality, the way the cyber attacks have got increased upon significantly. As a professional, what's your considerations and what would you like to share upon in the current times, considering the future technologies that one should be really factoring upon from a trust equation and the new architectures which are emerging for cyber safe world? Vishak,
Hey,
over to you.
thanks, Atul. It's always happy to connect and share, learn from eminent panel like you guys there. First, I want to set the stage. And the pandemic has sort of set the stage very uneven for defenders like us or practitioners like us. And what we're seeing is one end, the time to hack is reduced to a few minutes, but your time to detect and time to remediate has actually gone into an uneven balance. So that's where you need a different approach to mitigate your security breaches and build your security posture better way, right? And I think frameworks have been there, and I just want to touch upon important points like zero trust. And zero trust has been there for many years, but it has gained a lot more popularity. And the fundamentals of zero trust is like, how do you establish trust? And it's just not about username, device, but also look at your health and posture of the device. And also, how do you enforce trust? How do you enforce trust with least privileges access to application, network, workload, and all the user devices? And also, the third part is, how do you continuously verify trust? And that's trust is not permanent, it's temporary, and something which you actually dynamically verify that. So zero trust is gaining a lot more popularity, and that's what we've seen in the marketplace. More and more customers, especially during the pandemic, when they wanted to roll out remote working, they had adopted a zero trust framework. And they started with a very basic VPN connectivity and then added layers like multi-factor authentication. They added DNS security layer and also the endpoint control and tightened their security operations. So that's something which we are seeing customers actually adopting a zero trust framework. And also we are also seeing frameworks like MITRE ATT&CK framework. That's something which customers are adopting a lot more than ever before. And MITRE ATT&CK framework, looks at attack sequence across 12 stages, and then sequences out with all the controls and tools and techniques and procedures what you need to deploy to defend. So that's the second part. Probably we'll take a deeper dive on that. And third, the rise of IoT. That's something which we are seeing in the marketplace as your attack surface actually expands. Customers are trying to cope up with the challenges on IoT in terms of visibility, in terms of segmentation, and how do I marry the traditional IT and OT security, and give a unified view of your threat landscape. And I think these are three large uh, topics which we can double click as we go on. But I just want to set the stage. And we are heading towards an uneven balance of the attack surface. But we as defenders have a responsibility to adopt these frameworks and make sure your security posture is up to the game and defending your IT landscape per se.
Thank you so much, Vishak, for highlighting those three areas, and all three of them very, very relevant. And you started by bringing upon zero trust and how the recent past 6 months has taught us on what zero trust really implies. Before I move forward, I actually wanted on that one to be slightly double click, Vishak, and get some more insights into it, because there is a general perception saying zero trust is all about gaining trust at all point of time. But there are multiple approaches which are being looked upon over here, saying how can, while it is considered to be temporary, but how does it not become too inconvenient for the user? But at the same point of time, it is established in the right way so that an intruder is unable to get access upon. Are there some leading thoughts, Vishak, which you want to share with the audience today?
Absolutely, and I think it's important. And you got to have this framework in broken into at least the large pillars. And at Cisco, we look at this in 3W framework. Which is first one is workforce. It's all about securing your user, who they are. Do they have access to the right application? Is the device through which what they're accessing is secure? Is the device is trusted? So that's the workforce part of it, right? And of course, there are security frameworks around that. Then the second W is the workload. And what are the applications which are used in the enterprise? And whom are they communicating with? And what is the communication with your trusted, secure, workload per se? And especially during the pandemic, more and more enterprise users have adopted to shift to cloud because that's quite easy to hop on. But how do you get your workload visibility? And the last and the most important piece, which is more relevant, is your workplace. Do the users' devices authenticate for network access? What access they are granted? And are the device in the network secure? Is the network segmentation based on trust? So at Cisco, we broken down these three large pillars into these three W areas: workforce, workload, and workplace. And we looked at workforce. How do you secure your endpoints? Securing your users, securing your email, right? And workloads is more about securing your applications, securing the services, the microservices, and more focused towards inside threat detection. And on the workplace, how do you provide secure access back to the customers, your internal and as well as external? And how do you define your behavior analysis in your workplace? And how do you classify your assets? And most important is how do you feed in threat intelligence back to your three W's, which is your workforce, workload, and workplace. This is a common framework, and Cisco has been labeled as a leader in zero trust, and we've been having tremendous success in the marketplace for customers to adopt these three W framework: workforce, workloads, and workplace.
Thank you,
Back to you.
Vishak. Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that into life. And 3Ws really brings it into life and also gives a context on how zero trust becomes a reality. So thank you so much for sharing those insights. Well, pandemic has taught us a lot more than what we just heard from Vishak, which was one very, very important part about remote access. But we also heard Vishak talking the workloads and the workplaces, which are increasingly getting more digitized and getting more onto the cloud journey. The kind of technology, cloud technology adoption, which has happened in the last 6 months, the statistics go out and showcase is equivalent to what may have happened in the last 3 years. So that's the journey which we have covered upon. And as we have progressed on this journey, it obviously brought in much broader implications. One was what we heard from Vishak around the access and building trust. But I think the other one which has started emerging is on data, because data has become really, really important element. And when we talk on digital trust, data starts playing an extremely, extremely important role. With the kind of digital transformation and technology adoption that has happened in the recent past, we have also seen the number of incidents going up quite significantly. And on that point, let me bring in Nandini from CryptoMill CyberSecurity to share perspectives on, Nandini, some of the lessons which are being learned from the last 7 months, and specifically focusing around data and how data privacy or data protection is becoming fundamental to help ensure that there's adequate trust in the environment where we are operating. Nandini.
Thank you, Atul, and thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. So, Vishal, you made an interesting point on the zero trust piece, and I represent the group in the global arena who work from an innovation standpoint to address the growing challenges that we have today with respect to all things cyber, whether it's external hackers, internal rogues, you talked about that. And we also feel strongly about the zero trust approach as being paramount. This pandemic's been very disruptive in many ways. I mean, it stopped the whole world and changed the way we look at what we used to think was our normal. And equally, from a perspective of cyber attacks, it's thrust data to the forefront, where, as you said, Atul, data resides on an endpoint, on a mobile device, in the cloud. But ultimately, every organization, big or small, data is their crown jewels. And with this pandemic, as I always say, our frontline heroes are the healthcare providers, but behind the scene, there's complete pandemonium from the attackers, whether it's nation state driven attacks or internal rogues trying to make an extra buck. The reason being people are forced to work from home. All of that network security now is not as close to reach as it traditionally is. We're working with defense, for example, and they're hunkered down by their network security. And especially now when everybody's forced to work from home, how do you access that authentication process and things like that allow you to describe that you are who you are with respect to accessing sensitive data? So all that to say, data has become the centerfold. And of course, as you said, digitization is a big momentum of its own. And now you have the pandemic and all these unknowns. So the way I look at things when I look at cyber attacks and I read about breaches is, the crux of every cyber attack, external, internal, accidental, malicious, is the data that they're after. And so in many ways, we feel strongly that this pandemic has thrust the data-centric approach to security, both from a security and privacy perspective, both from a regulatory requirement and preservation of the crown jewels perspective, right to the forefront. And what I mean by that is, yes, it's served us really well to have network security, perimeter security, monitoring alerts, AI analytics. All of those are great, but at the end of the day, the hacker just needs to get in once. And it doesn't matter whether it's through an application server or it's through a network security access or in fact is within the organization. Once they're in, the challenge is, and why we see so many breaches successful, is the data itself is in the clear. So a zero trust approach for us, from our thinking perspective, is we're here to protect the data of any organization, big or small. The zero trust element is about giving access to encrypted assets, protected assets on a need-to-know basis. And that's dynamic, So for example, from a CryptoMill perspective, and I'm not doing a marketing plugin, just to give you an idea, we have this concept of a circle of trust. You're either in the circle or you're not. If you're in the circle, you have access to work on it, collaborate, edit, view. If you're not, you simply cannot get access because the default state of the data is that it stays encrypted. So that zero trust is primarily driving the fact that access to any sensitive data is dynamic on a need-to-know basis. As we all know, every day is different. Every access need is different. So strong policy-driven means to provide that zero trust where only the 5 of you have access to data today because that's what your role demands and is dynamic. And the beauty about that is if you're focused on protecting that data, that security travels with the data from your endpoint to your mobile device, to the cloud, and it's disruptive because you no longer have to focus on an endpoint security posture or a network security posture. Not to say that they're not effective, but it's a very powerful means to ensure that zero trust, prevent the attack vectors, external or internal, and take a proactive control back of sensitive data. So,
great points, Nandini, and thank you so much highlighting how there's an intersection which is emerging both from a zero trust perspective as well as from a data-centered security approach, which you beautifully articulated. I think I'll come back to you in some time to bring upon a very different element and just leaving that early thought, saying how some of these encryption or regulatory requirements may have an impact where the cloud bringing upon a global economy view can be disrupted upon. But hold on that thought. I'll come back to you on that one. It will be great to hear that perspective, Nandini, from you. We covered two brilliant elements where Vishak started by bringing a broader remote access and what we have learned from there from zero trust, and Nandini extending it by bringing in a data perspective and a data-led security approach, again, zero trust being the core. Before I dwell deeper into encryption and bring in Stiepan, I just want to bring in Andrew at this moment, because Andrew, there's a third component which you are very clearly thinking and focusing upon, which is related to the weakest link in the chain. And while Nandini brought out very clearly saying the attackers are going after the data and they may be using any channel, invariably it's the weakest link which is coming across. Andrew, what's your perspective around the same?
Hi, yes, and again, thank you for inviting me to be part of this. From my perspective, and asking this question as to whether the people are the weakest link or not is an interesting one, because I think it's difficult to isolate one aspect of it. If you consider the people, process, and technology aspects of cybersecurity, then they all interrelate, and it's very difficult to isolate any element of that and say it's actually the weakest link. If we kind of take a step back and look more at trust and what makes up trust and why people trust people, and therefore why people trust businesses, because they don't actually ever trust businesses really, they trust the people who represent the business, then we look at elements such as the credibility, the reliability, the intimacy aspect of it. So how people interact, how people link together, and so on. So but trust is all about people. So how do they work together? And kind of the credibility, reliability, intimacy are all positive aspects. So that's how trust is built. But trust can also be destroyed by people. And that's about them having very much a self-orientation, an awareness of themselves more than others, if you like. So we can relate this to cybersecurity and how this fits into the people, process, and technology aspects of things. So it's really about building the process and technology side of things to build that trust in people. So how do you pull together processes that work, technology that works within those processes, and actually allow the people to build the trust that's needed? So it's kind of having a different play on the concept of trust here and saying actually what matters in terms of a business is how the customers, how the stakeholders, how their employees trust that business as such, and that's through people. And cybersecurity needs to recognize that that's through the people. So yes, a lot of attacks that we see are involving weaknesses that are around people, but you've got to really question whether they are weaknesses around the people or weaknesses in the processes that are using technology. So I think one of the areas that's kind of not looked at enough within cybersecurity is the business process aspect. And it's how does that business process support people to be secure and support people to be the trusted element of the business. If I can just give one little example that happened to me late last week, I was getting a parcel delivered, and the delivery man came along with his parcel and put it on the ground, because obviously in these days you can't get very close to people and receive it. So he popped it on the ground. He wanted to take a photo of it to prove it had been delivered. But when he kind of picked his camera up to take the photo, it was it had the license plate of my car in the background. He said, "Oh, we'll just have to move it because it's got the license plate in." And I kind of looked at him thinking, "Oh, that's interesting." And then he went on to explain it was all to do with data protection and the fact that the photo couldn't have the license plate in because that then can identify me as an individual. I thought, wow, I really like this courier company now. I really trust them because your delivery driver understands data protection and why you shouldn't have a photo. It had my feet in it, but obviously they're not identifiable. But the license plate on the car was. And that really built my trust. The fact that he understood all of that and knew what he was doing with it built my trust in that particular courier company. That's great. And that's where the people element comes in. And I think that proves that they've informed, educated their people, and they really do understand how to undertake those business processes with the technology that they've been given in a secure manner.
Beautiful example, Andrew, for bringing it into life again. And I think you started by saying people, process, technology, the three components, which don't go away when we look upon on digital technology, cyber, or information security risk. It's been perennial. It will continue to be there while the modes of digital technology are changing. And I think one point which struck with me was saying, how do you build trust? And trust is being built by intimacy of people, but not just by intimacy, it's a cultural aspect. And the good example which you gave upon was not the awareness, but it's a culture which has been driven across that courier company, possibly, which resulted in the person who was delivering the parcel being so much aware and able to articulate it in a nice way, which anyhow brings upon trust very beautifully. So great points, Andrew. Thank you so much for sharing those perspectives. And again, I think there will be one or two themes which I will come back to you as we move forward in this session. But I truly appreciate what you talked upon. I think Stiepan is still off the camera. So let me get to Anjan. Anjan, we heard the ecosystem elements being talked over here.
So, sorry, I'm here if you need me.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why you cannot see me, but I am here.
Okay, I'll just come back to you, Stiepan, just in a minute. Anjan, because we're talking of this entire process, and Andrew brought out very clearly about process element, saying it's not always people, and process could be wider. And ecosystem is one of the key enablers for the process to operate at a different level. And today there's a big role which startup ecosystem is playing in helping for the industry overall to empower and move forward in the maturity direction of building trust in the digital environment. Wanted to get your thoughts, Anjan. How are you seeing it at this point of time?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Just I wanted to say a few words on the Indian context, in the sense that how the digitization process is actually expanding in every spheres. Some of the data points, and basically the Indian context, the needs for the skills as well as the startup ecosystem. So to start with a few pointers, for example, the companies have actually accelerated their digitization for their customers and supply chain and the internal operations by 3 to 4 years. And the share of digital and digitally enabled products in their portfolios has actually accelerated by almost 7 years. I mean, this is an amazing speed the things are happening in the Indian context. In fact, if you look at the $17 billion investments pledged by Amazon, Google, and Facebook only for India, and most of the companies, what we are seeing now, including us, is that the fast tracking of at least some digital transformation programs this year. Majority of these programs will be used for strengthening cybersecurity defenses, rolling out broader capabilities for work from home employees and providing better customer experience. So what we are seeing is a huge increase in the productivity, the enhancing the user experience, but the scattered network actually posing all this matter of concern. The Indian context again, if you can look at the Internet Crime Report 2019, it's released by FBI, that reveals India stands third in the world among the top 20 countries that are victims of internet crimes. The government realizes this importance of cybersecurity framework, and then our honorable Prime Minister is aware of the threats and that is coming from the cyberspace and how they have potential impact on India's society, economy, and the development. Therefore, India, of course, I mean, we are going to get the cybersecurity policy very soon. The new policy will be robust not only to protect information and the information infrastructure, but can also be the platform for building capabilities to prevent the respond the cyber threats and the combination of the people, process, and technology. So, as far as the skills as well as the startup ecosystem you have asked, I think there are 5 key elements on the whole ecosystem, if I can mention here. One, of course, the highly skilled workforce. I'm talking about, again, Indian context, and the high intensity in the research and technology development, robust infrastructure, of course, enabling policy and the regulatory framework, and thriving startup ecosystem. So I want to talk to you around the startup part. Of course, skills part, possibly we can come back later. On the startup side, I think the government must enact policies designed to attract venture capital, private equity, which is happening, but very focused to the cybersecurity. And a lot of efforts are also being now taken, bringing some investments from the high net worth Indian business houses to actually support startup ecosystem, and which is a very good sign that Indian investments going into the Indian startups in the cybersecurity area. Incubation hubs, we have many examples today. Some states like Telangana and Kerala, they are doing extremely well. And the cybersecurity startups in collaboration with the state governments would be another ways of supporting the startup ecosystem. And of course, the groom startup for strategic products, the funding, then product management, guidance, evaluation, preferential buying, and position India as a security sourcing hub. So possibly we'll come back on the skills and this part later, Atul, if you...
Sure. No, absolutely, Anjan, and thanks so much for making those points. I think you brought in a perspective from a country viewpoint and saying how economical development is dependent on ensuring cyber is addressed more holistically. A very clear perspective on saying where India is today from a cyber crime perspective, and how if we have to thrive the startup ecosystem to be very meaningful contributor to the overall journey from here, some of the key elements which need to be looked upon. Beautiful points, Anjan, and thanks so much for making those. But I'll hold on to you and come back to you on the skills, because that's another very important point, but hold on to that. Stiepan, over to you. Now we can see you. I thought for a moment this is a quantum encrypted channel. We can't see you. And that's why we were losing you all this while. We can't hear you now. Maybe you are on mute at this moment. You'll have to
now,
unmute.
can you hear me?
We can hear you
okay,
now very
thank
well.
You. By the way, you mentioned quantum in a joke, and I'm parked just beside the car, which happens to have a marking quantum. I'm not sure if you can see it. It has nothing to do with what we are speaking about, but I found it so fun that I made a post on LinkedIn about it. So this is probably why you saw me typing on the screen.
That's so nice for you to share upon, and it's coincidental that we're talking with you on quantum, and it's right in front of your eyes as
yes,
well.
Indeed.
But I wanted to come in, and bring some perspectives, even because we are talking about protection, which is fundamental to build upon a trust. And as it's always said, it takes ages to build trust, but it takes a matter of time, matter of few seconds to actually the trust to go away. Indeed. And maybe quantum is bringing that kind of a completely different turbulence in this environment where we are operating today, where when it is in reality, or if it is already in reality, and we look forward to your points, how is it going to transform the way what we are talking from a cyber safety, cyber security, and digital trust perspective? Happy to hear you, Stiepan.
Thank you for inviting me, and also for the great perspectives I heard so far. So that's a great question. So quantum IT, quantum computers in particular, already exist on the market. But as of now, those that are on the market at least are not powerful enough to break existing encryption, which is the base of all cybersecurity. I come from SC27, which I represent in the ITUD World Cybersecurity Index. I hope I told it in the right order. And there, actually, the history of SC27, ISO IEC JTC1 SC27 to be exact, which is about cybersecurity standardization, is one of cryptography. So it all started with cryptography, and then it expanded to other branches of cybersecurity as computing evolved in parallel as well. And eventually was dispatched in other ISO committees and even collaboration with other standard defining organizations, which is a quite critical topic when we speak of quantum safe cryptography. So cryptography made to resist, also called quantum resistant, or in the case of asymmetric post-quantum cryptography. So that cryptography has to be standardized now, because we know that in few years from now, there will be commercially available large enough quantum computers to break all or most existing standardized ciphers, in particular in the financial industry. And this is a huge issue just before our nose, so to speak. We start that, not we, but the community as a whole. It sort of works so far, but it's always very tight on time to be able to actually deliver usable standards just in time, or ideally before, but to be realistic, just in time for the moment where such large quantum computers will be made available. And to give you an idea about that, so earlier this year in Davos, in the World Economic Forum, the CEO of Google, who is of Indian origin, by the way, made the announcement that by 2025 earliest, such computers may be made available by Google for sale. And this is just one of the many players in this emerging area of commercial quantum IT. In the big names, I can think in particular of IBM and of Microsoft. Actually, all three led by Indian people, if we include Google. And IBM's chief researcher, who is now the CEO, in 2018 told a little club, the Churchill Club, that by 2023 eventually it would be the case. But this information was made public by some IT specialized news outlets. And now that he's the CEO, IBM made an official announcement that it would be by 2023 indeed that they would have a 1,000+ qubit computer, which is not yet enough to break existing cryptography, but is very, very close to it, because for instance, in our studies we made a comparison of existing studies to break AES, which is thought to be the most secure standard algorithm today for symmetric cryptography, with some enhancements that we made to the same. And for the base AES, which is based on existing research, not original research from us, we can see that with something like 6,000 and something qubits, a bit more than 6,000 qubits, people will be able actually to break AES. Of course, it also depends on the depth of the quantum circuit, and this would be a 1-hour lecture, so I will not dive too deep into that. But basically, what we consider the most secure today will eventually be broken as well once the quantum computers reach a certain level, which means that it is perhaps even more urgent than what NIST, for instance, thought with the post-quantum competition they organized, and which is still ongoing, which still refers to AES as the secure basis, and asks for the candidate ciphers to match the level of certain bit sizes of keys for AES in the asymmetric world. But actually we saw that it should go even further, and be improved also on the symmetric side, which is what we specialize in. And we are one of the few companies in the world to do that. And our path is very tied to the ITUT. As in the ITUT, we started working in standardization. And there we made a proposal as early as 2018 to have VoLTE, so 4G and 5G possibility of encrypting voice with actual post-quantum or quantum-resistant symmetric cryptography. As today, it's also symmetric cryptography that is mainly being used for that. And at the same time, there was a proposal by China Mobile to study which 256-bit mobile encryption algorithms may be used. Well, not necessarily mobile, but in their case, it's specific to mobile conversations encryption, which may be used for being quantum safe in 5G. And as time passed, their proposal has been proven as not secure enough. It doesn't actually bring the needed entropy, which is another cryptography specific, or rather cryptography specific term. It doesn't bring actual 256-bit entropy, which is the minimum for symmetric ciphers to be quantum safe. So this is why we typically say that AES 256 is quantum safe to a certain degree, which is true, but only to a certain degree, as everything, of course. And their cipher, as mentioned, has been proven insecure by Ericsson, who published several papers on the topic, showing that even in the classical context, actually, in the not quantum, in the pre-quantum context, it is not that secure, which left us in the both comfortable and uncomfortable position of being the only ones to make it to the final stage for that standard, which will be published in January next year, about quantum safe 5G. The scope is limited to 5G by intention of the original proposers, as they didn't see fit to make it to make such an upgrade for 4G as well. But that being said, such quantum safe symmetric encryption can as well be applied to everything ranging from 3G to 4G, and we even have something in the works for 2G. And now back to the overall picture, if I may.
Stephen, I will come. I'll have to come back to you because we may start going a bit short on the time. But I think this was very good information, and thank you so much. I think 2025, 2023, there are many years which are being referred out over here. But I think the bigger message which you are providing, that there is a need to start working on the standards which will provide us the quantum safe computing environment, quantum safe cryptography, and specifically all the emerging standards around 5G should be the ones which should be absolutely looking at it. And great to hear from you how it's working upon at this moment.
And actually, if I may add just one thing right now about what you just said, is that there is not only a need to work on these standards, but since they are already published for some of them or about to be published, like the one I mentioned, it's X.1811, there is a need to actually start the deployment of such technology, because you will have some IoT devices, for instance, or cars, that will be there for more than 10 years in the field. So you cannot afford actually to produce such a new car, for instance, if you don't make it ready for that and have it connected, which is the case of most new cars.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephen, for bringing that perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah. And on that, because you talked on IoT, let me go back to Vishak, connecting from an IoT perspective. Vishak, while we heard from Stiepan on how the world is going through continuous transformation, and quantum is another transformational technology which the world is looking forward. But even before we go to that, there's a big consideration which always comes onto IoT devices, saying how safe are they going to be because of the volume at which they will be deployed, or they are getting deployed, the places where they are getting deployed, the manageability is a constraint out over there. So it will be good to get your perspectives as how you are dealing with that, because I'm sure at Cisco this is a very common question which you deal upon. And maybe I will not have time to come back to you again in the panel. So I would also like you to, as you talk through this, talk upon two areas which you want audiences who are listening to us today on this panel. What are the two key takeaways which you would like them to start thinking if they're not already doing it? And if they're doing, then what they should be accelerating?
Sure. Let me touch upon first on the first one on the IoT part of it. One, the proliferation of devices in the surface is quite high. So we got to first. It's a four-step journey. To simply put it, the first step is to really look at an asset discovery, identify all your industrial assets, build the right security strategy for the industrial assets as such, right? And we've seen time and time and again the reported vulnerabilities on IoT, unpatched ones, non-upgradable ones, are far higher in terms of damaging. So the first and foremost practitioner view is to look at your asset discovery. What do you have currently, right? And look at what can be upgradable, right? And the second part is network segmentation, and where you have to isolate networks to build zones and conduits to avoid attacks to spread laterally. So I think your segmentation strategy on IoT is becoming a lot more important, because the IT and OT merger has already happened. We're all communicating on a common backbone now, right? Both the industrial automation and as well as your IT setup as well. So the network segmentation is the second most important part. And third, I would say, look at your IT intrusions and abnormal OT behaviors. Because if you don't catch up your anomaly on your OT setup, and that can actually, reduce your security posture per se. So how do you look at your threat detection in the IoT setup becomes the third pillar. And the fourth part is, how do you get the holistic IT and OT for security operations center point of view? Today, it's no more just process automation, but cybersecurity leaders are pushing the IT and OT integration from a security operations point of view. So you got to first look at your assets, look at your micro segmentation, look at your threat detection. And the last and most important part is integrate your IT and OT from a SOC point of view. So you got to scale up getting visibility on your ICS protocol in terms of supporting. At Cisco, I know we went through an acquisition route where we acquired a company called Centric, and that's now part of our IoT business unit. And that gives the product name is CyberVision, and it gives quick visibility across all the industrial protocols. Be it Schneider, be it Siemens, be it Rockwell, there's a list. And we also stepped up in terms of getting two-tier edge monitoring, whereby where you don't have legacy feeds coming back to your into your IT setup, we started placing those sensors who will actually understand and then beacon back to your traditional SIEM or your CMDB partner integrations per se. So we did a lot of heavy lifting in terms of integrating your IT and OT setup, and also how do you support third-party vendors, which are like our CyberVision OT security product supports our third-party competing vendors as well. We support the rest of the other, and also the form factor. How do you package it with software-based, VMware-based, Hyper-V in terms of support? So I think coming back to the four pillars, it is asset discovery, it is network segmentation, your threat detection, and integrated IT and OT from a security operation point. And I think if you
those are
look at
good
this,
takeaways. Absolutely brilliant takeaways, Vishak. Yeah, thanks so much. Sorry for interjecting. I know we'll start running very short on time, so I just wanted to.
Oh no, perfect, absolutely.
Those were great ones. If I move forward, and I know Nandini, I held back a point for you, where I talked upon saying how we are looking at the data protection encryption norms coming across. Is somewhere this going to have a big impact on the global economical collaboration with cloud technology promises, which co-building, sharing of information promises, innovation promises upon today? What's your perspective, Nandini?
So good point. And in fact, I would say it's actually happening. I know we're in discussions globally with respect to the combination of organizations going the digital route, moving to the cloud for a whole bunch of reasons, and then worrying about things that are top of mind for big and small, but more for the bigger organizations about sovereignty, integrity, access to data when in the cloud, who can get access. So all of those are pertinent things that are top of mind in parallel when we are in discussions with respect to protection and privacy preservation. In fact, I would say just listening to Stephen and Vishal talk about the quantum piece, the IoT piece, we're far more intertwined than we realize. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of expertise in this panel that is amazing to listen to. And as you said, Atul, there's so much that we can each contribute and talk to. But at the end of the day, if you take a step back, whether it's IoT or it's the quantum, we're all trying to solve the same problems with respect to bringing goodness into the world of protectionism, protecting data against the bad guys. I mean, we're speaking in an Indian conference, and if you go back to the heritage of India, there's always the asuras and then the gods. And so this panel right here is the superheroes in what Vishal's doing, in what, all of you guys, Andrew, by the way, hello, Canada, and Stephen is doing. So, the cloud piece, the IoT piece, the quantum piece, it's intertwined. And my take with the team is, when we look at combining this whole issue, whether it's zero trust, IoT, quantum resistant, you're absolutely right. There's quantum stuff happening where they're going to try to break AES. How do you put in a modular encryption tool that allows you to replace it with the most quantum resistant? So the way we look at the world is one day at a time, sweet Jesus. So we solve every aspect into the core of our architecture to address these varying points. To Vishal's point, IoT, and I'm not digressing, Atul, I just wanted to highlight, and I will come back to the cloud piece, but IoT, we've got an approach in data protection between devices and users. But really, what is IoT? In a simplistic world, is device to device as opposed to user to device. And a smaller surface area, but a larger scope. And so the same premise of data protection, data-centric approach with a zero trust combination has total viability to be extended from a device to device in a critical infrastructure setup, for example, in an IoT space, or within the cloud. Because really, if you look at the data flow, what do? Your most sensitive data, you'll have it on your laptop, you'll share it with a bunch of people across different IT jurisdictions, and some will put it on their mobile device, others will upload it on a cloud storage box, Dropbox. But ultimately, that data travels through different business processes depending on your data flow. When you look at a data-centric approach with your zero trust combination, you're doing two very important things. You're disruptively taking away the need for modular security postures from network to endpoints to cloud, and really focusing on the crown jewels, the data. You combine that with the security traveling with the data. In our case, we use encryption and cryptography to make sure of that. And so wherever that data goes, it stays encrypted. That's the default state. Great. So if it's in the cloud, it stays encrypted. The zero trust comes in on access on a need-to-know basis. But beautifully also, that also addresses the sovereignty integrity piece, because if the cloud provider is not a designated access on a need-to-know basis, they themselves cannot look into the data being hosted in their cloud. Sure, and therefore, although it sounds simplistic, it's actually a very powerful way to address the multiple attack vectors and issues that we're all discussing with respect to, obviously, to your point and Stephen and Vishal's point, making sure that we keep the zero trust top of mind in the architecture of the innovation. We keep the modular representation, replacement of new upcoming quantum resistant capabilities in the overall architecture. But as I think you also said, India is a hub of a lot of innovation, and keeping all those in mind, you can address the ongoing challenges which are here to stay with respect to the cloud and anything else.
Well, that's the mankind. There's constantly challenges, and there are constant solutions which are going to come across. So thanks so much, Nandini, for making those points and bringing perspective on how encryption is helping us to solve the issues around data residency or data sovereignty and how it's relevant from a cloud perspective. I know we are really getting short on time because all of us are so passionate. But here I'm going to Anjan very quickly before I go to Andrew and then to Stiepan. Just a couple of minutes updates from each one of you. Anjan, we heard so much, and one constant challenge continues to be skill build. Would like to get your perspective, but keep it short, please. That's my request, Anjan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'll be very brief. Atul. In the sense, I think I see, and we are, mostly seeing this as an opportunity for India. Being it's a demographically rich and rapidly digitizing India with tech-savvy diaspora, I think must create future-ready cybersecurity workforce. I mean, as an enabling national asset. In fact, globally, there is a huge demand we see for the skilled cyber professionals, and India possibly can step in to fill this global void. I think this is where we are looking at as an opportunity. And just a few recommendations and what we're working with the government in that is the development of a national cybersecurity education and the skills policy framework to build skilled workforce and upgrade job quality to the global standards. This is what actually is the important steps towards that. Development of a science of cybersecurity at schools and the colleges through specialized capsules and amendment of the core curriculum. That's the second part. Third action is basically to mandate the universities and the colleges to offer the cybersecurity courses in the graduate, postgraduate, and the PhD levels. That's the fourth one. And of course, the creation and promotion of vocational and specialization courses and certifications. That's important. The last one I just wanted to make that how to incentivize for educating or skilling employees on cybersecurity, be it in the government job or in the private job, to enable them to use technology wisely, understand the technological know-how, and become the first line of defense. I think these are the few key pointers actually we're working on to really look at that India possibly position itself as a skilled
Brilliant.
workforce.
Thank you so much, Anjan. I think we heard from Nandini how India can contribute so much more to the global battle which we have currently from a cyber safe perspective. And your perspectives on how we can bring upon the skills really is going to address that quite significantly. Hopefully, some of these policies are very time bound so that we can start seeing the outcomes coming out very quickly. Thank you so much, Anjan, for making those points. Yeah, Andrew, I quickly move on to you. And again, a short one from you. We heard you talking about trust. We heard you talking on people and processes. I think the last point which I want to hear from you, and you brought in a great example in the initial pitch, saying there is a need for a cultural shift to happen rather than it just being a learning and awareness. What's your take around this? And maybe if you can bring slightly more broader global perspective, but my request will be to be short. That will be very helpful, Andrew.
Yeah, so definitely in terms of the need for a cultural shift in terms of how people think about cybersecurity and how we make that happen within the global context and how we get the technology and the processes to be able to support those people in terms of doing that. The culture is changing. We've seen a lot through the pandemic in terms of people understanding a lot more about remote working, understanding a lot more about the security of devices at home and so on. So things are changing. They just need to change quickly. And there needs to be that move by organizations, by governments, as has already been mentioned, in terms of building not just skills for cybersecurity people, but cyber skills for everybody. And we need the technology to ensure that the easiest way is the most secure way. And we need the processes that people are following to be guiding them through a secure process and not having handoffs in processes that break down the chain of security. So it's putting all of those pieces together.
I think the easiest way being the secure way is a punchline which I'll carry with me And thank you so much, Andrew, for making that one. By the way, I obviously appreciate a lot on the process, but I do get carried forward by the punchline. So the easiest way being the secure way. That's a key one. Stephen, I come back to you just as closing. We're completely out of time here.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very
Yes?
well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, because I just had
two or three
someone
points.
trying to call me, so I was fearing that would have interrupted the communication, but it seems it did not. So I have the, as with the case of the standard we participate in, I have the chance and the risk of being the one to conclude. So I really appreciate all my previous fellow panelists' speeches individually, as each of them brings important perspectives, starting from the, let's say, historic and even religious one of the fight, which is not only in Indian mythology and religions, but here in Europe as well, of the fight between good and evil in our head and in the real world as well. And then coming to Mr. Anjan Das, I really recognize that it is the right moment for India to move forward and fast in this space to eventually become a leader. And ourselves as a company very much look forward to be producing in India. So that's perhaps something to elaborate more on in another occasion. And coming to what Mr. Andrew Fisk just said, I believe his punchline is a really excellent one, as we must make it the most secure possible, but also easy to use. And maybe just a quick remark towards what we are doing in India and why we are in an Indian Mobile Congress panel at all. So actually, we started our activities in India and we, upon demand from our representative in India, developed very quickly Zoom alternative, as many people were fearing the use of Zoom due to geopolitical and security reasons. And we still don't use it, by the way, due to security reasons. So we launched something that I put in the chat if someone wants to look at it, which is hosted in India and is for the whole world. Gradually we made it available in other places, and has a app that goes back to what Nandini was mentioning, because it's called Deva with 3 A's, because it's the name of our subsidiary for the Asian and so on regions. So it relates as well to the figures of the Indian pantheon. And I believe I will not take more of your time, as I know it is very short. But I'm again very thankful for having the opportunity to participate here, and I hope that next year we can do it on our Meet. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephen. And I completely agree with your wish for the next year. Everyone is looking forward to that. That we do it not on a virtual platform, but we do it on a physical platform where
that
each
would
one
be
of
even
you
better.
Yeah, where each one of you get to be in India at this time of the year.
Indeed.
But it was brilliant to have this conversation. And I did tell everyone saying, this is a panel which is very difficult to be moderated because each one of you brings so deep perspectives. Starting from Vishak, who brought in such great inputs, to Nandini, who was bringing in how zero trust along with encryption is going to help us deal with various challenges that we look across otherwise. Andrew, you've been all citing upon some brilliant examples, bringing on some things which are so simple but can be so easily correlated. And thanks so much for messaging that out. Anjan, for bringing in perspective from a country, how country can make significant impact at a global level, specifically in an area which is here for long. And Stephen, finally to you for enlightening us on how the cryptography may go through a complete shift and how quantum is moving at the pace at which it is moving. And we all look forward to the standard coming forward in January so that we can make the most of it and start using it and deploying upon.
Thank you very
On
much.
that note, thank you, everyone. I know it's been a privilege having all of you today here, hearing your perspectives, and I'm sure all of our audiences will get a lot of benefit out of our discussion. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.